Once you master this mindset, no one can control you. Think about that for a second. Every day people try to pull your strings with approval, rejection, opinions, even silence, and most of the time, without realizing it, you give them the power to decide how you feel. But Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, revealed something life-changing. The real prison is not outside, it's inside your own mind. This video is not about becoming cold or heartless. It's about becoming free. Free from the invisible chains of validation, free from the fear of rejection, and free from the triggers that make you react without thinking. Because here's the truth. When people can control your emotions, they control you. But when you master your inner world, you become untouchable. In this video, we'll explore 10 powerful mindsets inspired by Jung's philosophy. Each one designed to help you reclaim your power and live without being controlled by anyone. Miss even one and you'll miss the key to freedom. 1. Understand emotional detachment. Detach, don't disconnect. Feel, but don't react. Emotional detachment is one of the most misunderstood concepts in psychology. The moment people hear the word detachment, they think of coldness, numbness, or indifference. But that's not what Carl Jung or any great thinker meant. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care without becoming enslaved. You feel deeply, but you don't allow those feelings to drag you into reactions that destroy your peace or make you manipulable. Think of a puppet on strings. The puppet dances not because it chooses to, but because someone else pulls the string. Every time you lose yourself in anger, every time rejection shatters your self-worth, every time praise becomes the air you breathe, you're that puppet. Jung's philosophy teaches us that the first step toward true freedom is cutting those strings, not by denying your emotions, but by learning how to hold them without being ruled by them. Imagine you're in traffic and someone cuts you off. Instantly, your body reacts, heart races, fists tighten, maybe even words slip out of your mouth. That's a trigger. Now think deeper. Who's in control in that moment? You or the stranger who doesn't even know your name? By reacting automatically, you've handed them your peace. Detachment in this situation would mean, yes, you feel the irritation rise, but instead of feeding it, you observe it. You recognize, I am angry, but I don't have to become anger. That gap, the space between feeling and reacting, is where your power lives. Carl Jung often warned about the unconscious forces that drive us. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Emotional detachment is the process of making those unconscious patterns visible. Most of us have been conditioned since childhood to react instantly, to cry when scolded, to feel unworthy when rejected, to explode when insulted. But as adults, if we continue living this way, we remain children in grown-up bodies. Detachment does not mean suppression. Suppression is dangerous. It means pushing emotions so deep inside that they rot and eventually explode. Detachment means acknowledgement. It means allowing yourself to feel fully, but refusing to let the feeling hijack your behavior. For example, someone criticizes your work. The natural reaction is defensiveness. But with detachment, you pause, breathe, and separate the event from your identity. Their criticism is their perspective, not a definition of who you are. This simple practice keeps you free from unnecessary pain. Philosophers across time have echoed this truth. The Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius, said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Jung's lens adds another layer. Your emotions are messengers, not masters. They show you what you value, what you fear, what you secretly crave. But if you let them control you, they become weapons others can use against you. Detachment turns those weapons into wisdom. Let's make this practical. How do you start cultivating emotional detachment? 1. Notice the trigger. Every time you feel a strong emotion, pause. Name it. This is anger. This is fear. This is excitement. Naming breaks the spell. 2. Observe. Don't merge. Instead of saying, I am angry, say, I feel anger. You are not the emotion. You are the witness of it. 3. Create space before response. Train yourself to delay reactions. Even a 5-second pause rewires the brain from impulse to choice. 4. Reframe the story. Ask, is this really about me or is it about them? Most insults, judgments, or rejections say more about the other person than about you. 5. Release the need to win. Detachment often means walking away without proving yourself. Peace is more valuable than being right. When you begin to live like this, people notice something strange about you. They can't get under your skin. Their insults bounce off. Their silence doesn't shake you. Their approval feels nice, but it doesn't enslave you. And this is where control begins to shift. Because manipulators thrive on your reactivity. If you don't react, they have nothing to feed on. Let me share a small story. A monk was once insulted harshly by a man in public. Everyone expected the monk to reply, to defend his honor. Instead, the monk smiled and said nothing. Later, his disciples asked, "Master, why didn't you respond?" The monk replied, "If someone offers you a gift and you don't take it, to whom does it belong?" The insult never entered him because he refused to receive it. That is emotional detachment in action. But here's the paradox. Detachment actually makes you more compassionate. Why? Because when you are not enslaved by your own emotions, you can truly listen to others. You can see their pain without getting lost in it. You can love without clinging. You can support without controlling. Detachment frees not only you, but also the people around you, because your love is no longer needy. It is pure. Carl Jung would argue that emotional detachment is the foundation of individuation, the process of becoming your true self. Only when you stop being controlled by others' opinions, by unconscious emotional chains, can you discover who you really are. Without this step, the rest of the mindset cannot take root. So remember this. Detachment is not disconnection. It's power with presence. It's being able to feel joy, pain, anger, and love fully, but choosing your response instead of being enslaved by reaction. Once you practice this, you'll realize something profound. People lose the ability to control you the moment you stop giving them the power of your reactions. That's the first key Jung would want you to master. Understand emotional detachment. 2. Stop seeking validation. Approval is addictive. The moment you stop needing it, you're free. Human beings are wired to seek validation. From the moment we are born, we crave approval. As infants, we cry for attention. As children, we look to parents for reassurance. As teenagers, we want our peers to accept us. And as adults, we often measure our worth through the eyes of society. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The endless search for validation is a silent form of slavery. Because when your self-worth depends on someone else's nod, their silence, or their applause, you've handed them control over your happiness. Carl Jung believed that much of human suffering comes from the masks we wear to please others. He called this the persona, the socially acceptable version of ourselves we present to the world. The persona isn't always bad. We need it to function in society. But the danger begins when we forget the difference between the mask and the self. When you chase validation, you strengthen the mask while abandoning your real identity. Think about social media. One picture, one video, one post, and suddenly your sense of worth is tied to likes, comments, and followers. If they approve, you feel worthy. If they don't, you feel invisible. That cycle is addictive because it mimics the brain's dopamine reward system. Every like is a hit, every share is a shot of approval. But like any addiction, the more you chase it, the emptier you become. Psychology explains this in terms of external locus of control. When your sense of value comes from the outside, you are like a leaf blowing in the wind, tossed around by praise or criticism. But when you develop an internal locus of control, you anchor yourself within. That's when people's opinions become information, not commandments. Why is this so powerful? Because the need for validation is the oldest tool of manipulation. People can control you by giving or withholding approval. Employers use it, partners use it, friends use it, even strangers use it. If they know you crave validation, they can reward you when you obey and punish you when you resist. It's the psychology of the carrot and the stick. But once you no longer need their validation, you break the cycle. Let's take a simple example. Imagine two employees. One constantly seeks the boss's approval, staying late, agreeing with everything, terrified of being disliked. The other does their work with excellence but doesn't chase compliments. The first becomes a puppet, easily manipulated, underpaid, overworked. The second earns respect because their value is clear even without flattery. Ironically, the one who doesn't seek validation often receives it naturally, while the one who craves it never feels satisfied. Philosophy also supports this. The Stoics taught, if you live according to nature, you will never be poor. If you live according to opinion, you will never be rich. Jung would add, the person who lives by validation becomes a stranger to themselves. They project an image the world loves, but inside they feel hollow. The soul withers when it is not allowed to be authentic. So how do you stop seeking validation in a world built on it? 1. Recognize the pattern. Notice when you change your behavior to please others. Did you agree when you wanted to disagree? Did you post something just for attention? Awareness is step 1. 2. Ask, who am I trying to impress? Each time you crave approval, pause. Is it your boss, your partner, your friends, or faceless strangers online? What happens if they don't approve? You'll realize the fear of disapproval is often exaggerated. 3. Validate yourself first. Each day, practice acknowledging your own effort before waiting for others. Did you finish a task? Appreciate yourself. Did you stand up for your values? Congratulate yourself. Self-validation weakens the addiction to external praise. 4. Redefine rejection. When someone disapproves, instead of seeing it as a verdict on your worth, view it as feedback about their preferences, not your essence. Their limits are not your limits. 5. Detach from the crowd. Practice doing things without broadcasting them. Read a book without posting it. Work out without selfies. Help someone without telling anyone. Learn the joy of invisible victories. Here's the paradox. When you stop chasing validation, you become more attractive, more respected, and more powerful. Why? Because people sense authenticity. They trust those who don't bend like reeds in the wind. They admire those who don't beg for applause. Ironically, freedom from validation brings genuine respect, but by then, you don't need it. A story illustrates this well. A young artist once showed his work to a great master, asking, "Do you think it's good?" The master replied, "Does it matter what I think if it is your truth?" At first, the artist felt hurt, but later he realized the lesson. If you live for the applause of others, you'll die when the applause fades. But if you live for your inner truth, you will stand even in silence. Carl Jung often spoke about individuation, becoming whole by uniting your conscious and unconscious selves. Seeking validation keeps you fragmented, always adjusting, always editing yourself to please the crowd. But individuation means embracing your uniqueness, even if the world doesn't clap. So here's the mindset shift. Approval is a pleasant gift, but never a necessity. You can appreciate it when it comes, but you don't collapse when it doesn't. Validation loses its grip when you realize that no one, not even the people you love most, can define your worth. That definition belongs only to you. And once you stop needing validation, you are free. Free to act, free to create, free to live by your truth. That is why Carl Jung would insist, if you want to become unconquerable, stop living for applause. Because the crowd can love you today and crucify you tomorrow. But when you no longer need them, their control over you ends forever. 3. Master the art of silence. Not everything needs a response. Silence is strength. In a world obsessed with noise, silence is rebellion. Look around, everyone is talking, posting, commenting, reacting. We live in an age where constant expression is mistaken for strength. But the truth is the opposite. The more you speak without thought, the easier it is for others to control you. Silence, when mastered, becomes one of the greatest psychological weapons. Carl Jung believed that silence is not emptiness, it is presence. Most people fear silence because it forces them to face themselves. That's why many cannot sit alone in a quiet room without reaching for their phone, the TV, or some distraction. Noise is their escape from the unconscious. But Jung taught that the unconscious holds the very key to freedom. By embracing silence, you confront your inner world instead of running from it. And when you learn to live comfortably in silence, no one can manipulate you with noise. Think about arguments. When someone insults you, the natural urge is to defend yourself immediately. That's the trap. The more you explain, the more power you hand over. The more you argue, the more tangled you become in their web. But when you respond with silence, something profound happens. The power dynamic shifts. They expect a reaction. When it doesn't come, they are left exposed, powerless. Silence creates discomfort in those who seek control because it denies them the emotional fuel they crave. Consider this. Manipulators thrive on your words. The more you reveal, the more they analyze, twist, and weaponize your language. Silence, on the other hand, starves them. It forces them to confront themselves, to question their assumptions, to fill the void with their own insecurities. Jung would say silence turns the unconscious mirror back onto them. They see themselves reflected, not you. But mastering silence isn't just about withholding words from others. It's also about mastering inner silence. The most dangerous voice that controls you is often not outside, but inside your own head. The endless chatter of self-criticism, fear, and doubt can be louder than the world itself. Learning to quiet that inner noise through practices like meditation, mindfulness, or even mindful breathing is essential. When the inner voice no longer bullies you, the outside voices lose their sting. Philosophically, silence has always been seen as a form of wisdom. The Tao Te Ching says, "Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know." The Stoics echoed this by teaching restraint, to speak less but with more weight. Jung, however, gave silence a psychological depth. Silence is where the unconscious whispers. Those who cannot bear silence cannot hear themselves. And those who cannot hear themselves are easily controlled by others. Let's ground this in practical life. How do you master the art of silence? 1. Pause before responding. In conversation, train yourself to wait a moment before answering. That pause gives you control over your words instead of letting emotions dictate them. 2. Let your silence speak. When insulted or provoked, ask, "Does this even deserve a response?" Silence can be louder than 1,000 words when delivered with composure. 3. Limit oversharing. The more you reveal, the easier it is for people to manipulate you. Keep parts of your life private. Mystery protects power. 4. Practice inner silence. Each day, spend a few minutes in stillness. No music, no phone, no distractions. It trains your nervous system to be at peace without external noise. 5. Choose words with weight. When you do speak, let your words come from clarity, not impulse. People respect silence because it makes every word you do speak more powerful. Silence is not weakness, it is presence. It shows you are not desperate to prove, to explain, to win every argument. Those who cannot control themselves rush to fill silence with noise. Those who are truly strong can sit in silence and let their presence do the speaking. A story illustrates this beautifully. A king once asked his wise advisor, "What is the greatest weapon in the world?" The advisor replied, "Silence." Confused, the king asked why. The advisor explained, "Because silence cannot be defeated. Words can be attacked, twisted, disproven. But silence? Silence stands unshaken." Think about great leaders, mystics, or philosophers. Their silence often carried more weight than speeches. Jung would argue that silence radiates from inner wholeness. When you are at peace with yourself, you don't need to convince others of who you are. Your silence becomes proof. Now let's be clear. Silence is not avoidance. It is not passive aggression. It is intentional restraint. It is choosing not to waste energy where it is not deserved. Silence in the face of truth is cowardice, but silence in the face of manipulation is power. The difference lies in awareness. When you practice silence, you create space. Space for thought, space for reflection, space for wisdom to emerge. And in that space, you are free. Because silence severs the strings others use to control you. They can provoke, but you don't dance. They can demand, but you don't bow. They can scream, but you don't flinch. That is unshakable strength. Carl Jung's philosophy reminds us that true mastery is not about conquering others, but about conquering ourselves. Mastering silence is one of the clearest signs of that mastery. Once you embrace it, you realize that not every battle needs to be fought with words. Some battles are won by saying nothing at all. So remember this: silence is not the absence of power. Silence is power in its purest form. And once you master the art of silence, people lose the ability to manipulate you with noise. Because your strength no longer comes from what you say, it comes from what you refuse to say. 4. Know your triggers. If they can trigger you, they can control you. Self-awareness is power. Every human being has psychological buttons. These are emotional triggers, invisible switches in your nervous system that, when pushed, can override your rational mind. They make you lash out in anger, collapse into self-doubt, or sink into shame. And here's the hard truth: the people who know your triggers, whether consciously or unconsciously, can control you. That's why Carl Jung emphasized, the first step to freedom is self-awareness. Think about it. A simple insult can ruin your day. A rejection can spiral you into despair. A compliment can lift you so high that you become dependent on receiving more. These external inputs are nothing but fingers pressing your internal buttons. If you don't know where your buttons are, you're like a machine waiting to be operated by anyone clever enough to use them. Jung believed the unconscious mind holds our deepest wounds, insecurities, and unresolved conflicts. These unresolved parts of ourselves are exactly what become triggers. For example, if you grew up feeling unseen, even a small sign of being ignored might unleash overwhelming anger. If you were raised to equate failure with worthlessness, any mistake can trigger shame so powerful that you can't think straight. Triggers are rarely about the present moment. They are echoes of old wounds replaying themselves. This is why Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When you don't examine your triggers, life feels like a series of coincidences. Why do people always disrespect me? Why do I always attract rejection? Why do I always lose control? In reality, your triggers are running the show. Others simply stumble upon them, or worse, deliberately use them against you. Consider manipulators. They study your reactions. If they see you crave approval, they'll give it and then withhold it to keep you hooked. If they notice you fear abandonment, they'll threaten to leave in order to control you. If they sense your pride, they'll poke at your ego to make you overreact. Without awareness of your triggers, you are a puppet on invisible strings. So how do you reclaim control? By shining light on the shadow. Jung's work with the shadow self teaches that the parts of us we suppress or deny often control us the most. Knowing your triggers means being brutally honest about your weaknesses, insecurities, and hidden fears. Here are steps to begin mastering your triggers. 1. Notice patterns. Write down situations where you felt extreme emotions, anger, jealousy, shame, panic. Ask yourself, what specifically set me off? Patterns will emerge. 2. Trace the root. Most triggers don't start today. They have roots in childhood or past experiences. If criticism devastates you, maybe you grew up in an environment where love was conditional on performance. If rejection crushes you, maybe you carry the wound of abandonment. Identifying the root transforms the trigger from mystery into insight. 3. Separate present from past. When triggered, remind yourself, this reaction is bigger than the moment. It belongs to an older wound. That awareness weakens the trigger's grip. 4. Practice response, not reaction. When you feel triggered, don't react instantly. Pause. Breathe. Ask, what's really happening here? This shift from automatic reaction to conscious response is liberation. 5. Reframe the trigger. Instead of seeing triggers as enemies, view them as teachers. Each trigger points to an unresolved part of you that needs healing. Philosophically, triggers are the gateways to freedom. The Stoics taught that no one can harm you without your consent. But they also admitted the hardest battle is with your own mind. Jung extended this. Your triggers show you where you still lack sovereignty. To master yourself, you must face them directly. Let's illustrate with a story. A man was constantly provoked by his co-worker who mocked his intelligence. Every time he exploded with rage. One day he stopped and asked himself, "Why does this hurt so much?" Tracing back, he realized he grew up with a father who belittled him daily. The co-worker's words were not just insults, they were echoes of his father's voice. Once he understood this, the co-worker lost his power. The insult still stung, but it no longer controlled him. Over time, he responded with calm silence and the provocations stopped. His trigger transformed into awareness. This is the essence of Jungian psychology. What you don't face will haunt you, but what you face will free you. Knowing your triggers doesn't mean you never feel pain again. It means pain no longer owns you. Here's the paradox. People fear facing their triggers because they don't want to feel weak. But in truth, owning your triggers is the ultimate strength. When you know your vulnerabilities, no one can weaponize them against you. Imagine playing a game where every weakness is hidden. Your opponent will exploit them. But if you openly acknowledge, "Yes, this is my weakness," you take away the opponent's weapon. Self-awareness disarms manipulation. Jung would call this integration, bringing the unconscious into the light. By knowing your triggers, you integrate the parts of yourself that once controlled you from the shadows. Instead of being a slave to reactions, you become a master of responses. So remember this. Triggers are not your enemies. They are signals pointing toward your growth. If they can trigger you, they can control you. But once you know your triggers, no one, not lovers, not enemies, not strangers, can ever truly pull your strings again. Self-awareness is the foundation of unshakable freedom. 5. Kill the fear of rejection. Rejection. Just the sound of that word can sting. It brings back memories of unreturned texts, failed job applications, or moments when someone looked us in the eye and said, "No, you're not what I'm looking for." Few things pierce the human ego as sharply as rejection. It feels personal, like a direct attack on our worth. But here's the profound truth. Rejection does not define you. It defines the other person's perspective, their limits, and their circumstances. And if you can master the fear of rejection, you will step into one of the most liberating powers Carl Jung pointed toward: freedom from external approval. Jung often explored the deep relationship between the individual and the collective, the tension between wanting to belong and the need to be authentic. Rejection, in many ways, is the crucible where this tension plays out. On one hand, humans are wired to seek acceptance because, for most of history, being part of the tribe meant survival. On the other, your uniqueness demands expression, and that uniqueness will not always be welcomed. The clash between these two forces creates fear. What if they don't like me? What if I'm not enough? What if I'm abandoned? But pause for a moment. What if rejection is not a statement about you, but a mirror reflecting back the other person's boundaries, needs, or limitations? If someone rejects you, it does not mean you are worthless. It means you are not aligned with their current story. The tragedy is not in being rejected. The tragedy is in letting rejection shrink your spirit, causing you to conform, to silence your truth, to wear masks so that you're never turned away again. That is how control takes root. Fear of rejection becomes the leash that others use to guide your choices. Think about it. How many times have you avoided speaking your mind because you didn't want to lose approval? How many times have you stayed silent in meetings, avoided confessing your feelings, or settled for less just to avoid hearing no? That hesitation, born of fear, is invisible control. You are not acting freely. You are acting under the imagined threat of rejection. Now consider the alternative. Imagine you strip rejection of its sting. Imagine you embrace no as a filter, a sorting mechanism, a tool that helps you find where you truly belong. Rejection then becomes not an enemy, but a guide. When a door closes, it directs you to a door that actually fits your spirit. When someone says, "You're not right for me," what they are really saying is, I am not the right match for your energy, your growth, or your future. Seen this way, rejection is not about loss, it is about redirection. Carl Jung believed in individuation, the process of becoming your true, whole self. Fear of rejection is the greatest barrier to individuation because it pressures you to mold yourself into what others desire. If you can break this fear, you free yourself to walk your own path, even if it means walking alone for a time. Paradoxically, when you stop fearing rejection, you start attracting relationships, opportunities, and communities that truly resonate with who you are, because you are no longer pretending. Consider great innovators, artists, and leaders. Every single one of them faced rejection. Vincent van Gogh sold only one painting in his lifetime. Steve Jobs was fired from his own company. J.K. Rowling was rejected by dozens of publishers before Harry Potter became a cultural phenomenon. If they had feared rejection, if they had allowed those no's to define them, the world would have been robbed of their brilliance. What they understood, whether consciously or intuitively, is that rejection is not the final verdict. It's a test of resilience. So how do you kill the fear of rejection in your own life? It starts with reframing. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" ask, "What does this experience reveal about them or about timing?" Instead of shrinking, expand. Instead of closing your heart, keep it open. The more you expose yourself to rejection, the more you desensitize yourself to its sting. Ironically, the people who face rejection often end up being the ones most respected because their courage to show up, to risk failure, to risk no, becomes undeniable strength. Here's the paradox. The more you fear rejection, the more you give others power to control you. But the more you embrace rejection, the less it matters, and the freer you become. When no longer paralyzes you, manipulation loses its grip. Nobody can dangle approval in front of you like a carrot. Nobody can make you beg for acceptance. You become someone who walks into the world fully alive, knowing that your worth is not up for negotiation. Jung would remind us that the shadow, our hidden fears, must be faced, not avoided. To kill the fear of rejection, you must face it head-on. Let yourself hear no without collapsing. Let yourself be turned away without losing dignity. Let yourself be misunderstood without scrambling to explain. Every rejection becomes a small death of ego, and every time you survive it, you are reborn stronger. And that is the ultimate truth. Rejection does not kill you, it builds you. The death you fear is imaginary. What dies is the illusion that you need everyone's approval. What is born is the unshakable realization that you are whole, even when others cannot see it. And once you master this, rejection no longer controls you. In fact, nothing does. 6. Detach from outcomes. Carl Jung often warned about the dangers of attaching yourself too deeply to results. He understood something most people never realize until it's too late. When your peace depends on outcomes, you're no longer in control. The results own you, and whoever can influence those results owns you too. Think about it. You prepare for a job interview. You put in effort. You show up. You do your best. But if your happiness depends on whether they say yes, then you've handed your power over to strangers. If you succeed, you feel validated. If you fail, you collapse. That's not freedom. That's bondage disguised as ambition. Jung's philosophy teaches that true power lies in detaching from the outcome, not from the effort. Effort is yours. Outcome is not. Effort is controllable. Outcome is not. The moment you obsess over results, whether it's a grade, a relationship, a promotion, you unconsciously create anxiety. You become restless, insecure, and vulnerable. Why? Because you've tied your worth to something external, unstable, and unpredictable. Detachment is not laziness. It's not carelessness. It's wisdom. It means you give your absolute best, but then you release the need for things to unfold in a specific way. This paradox creates strength. You're no longer desperate. And desperation is what people smell when they try to manipulate you. Take relationships, for example. If you're attached to whether someone stays or leaves, you will bend, compromise, and even betray yourself to avoid abandonment. But if you detach from that outcome, you love deeply, yet stand firm in your dignity. No one can threaten to leave to control you because your sense of self doesn't depend on them staying. That's emotional independence. Philosophically, this detachment ties back to ancient Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Jung echoed this truth in his own way, saying that life is less about controlling reality and more about aligning with it. The unconscious mind often seeks control to feel safe, but ironically, control creates suffering. When you detach from outcomes, you also step out of fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of uncertainty. All lose their grip on you, because you've already accepted that life will unfold as it must. You are no longer bargaining with reality, begging it to bend to your expectations. Instead, you move with it, flowing, adapting, adjusting. But how do you practice this in daily life? 1. Shift your focus to process, not product. If you're working on a project, concentrate on doing it with excellence, not obsessing over whether it goes viral or wins. 2. Create internal measures of success. Instead of asking, "Did I win?" ask, "Did I give my best effort? Did I act with integrity?" 3. Detach through acceptance. Accept the possibility of both success and failure before you act. When you're at peace with both, neither can control you. 4. Practice mindfulness. Notice when you're obsessing about results and gently bring yourself back to the present action. Detachment also neutralizes manipulation. If someone knows you're desperate for a particular outcome, they can exploit you. Employers exploit people desperate for jobs. Lovers exploit those desperate for affection. Friends exploit those desperate for approval. But once you're free from that dependency, you can't be controlled. You become unpredictable, unshakable. You respond from strength, not from fear. Carl Jung would say that attachment to outcomes is the shadow of insecurity, the hidden fear that you're not enough unless things turn out in your favor. By integrating this shadow, by facing it and accepting it, you discover that your worth is not measured in wins or losses. Your worth is intrinsic, untouchable, eternal. Imagine walking into every situation with this mindset. I will give my all, but no matter what happens, I remain whole. That's the ultimate power. That's when life stops controlling you and you start flowing with life. Detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care deeply, but you're not enslaved. It means you plant seeds without demanding instant fruit. It means you play the game of life passionately, but without the crushing weight of obsession. And when you live like this, you experience something rare, inner freedom. Because here's the truth, control is an illusion. The only thing you ever truly own is your effort, your choices, and your response. Outcomes are borrowed from the universe. Master detachment, and you master life. 7. Control your inner dialogue. Your thoughts create your reality. Stop bullying yourself in your head. The mind is the battlefield where freedom is won or lost. Most people spend their entire lives at war with themselves, yet fail to see it. Thoughts continuously chatter, criticize, and sabotage, shaping perception, decisions, and reality. Carl Jung emphasized that the inner world determines the outer world. If your inner dialogue is toxic, judgmental, and reactive, then no amount of external mastery can make you free. Control begins from within. Think about it. How often do you hear a quiet, insidious voice saying, "You're not enough, you'll fail, they don't like you," or "You're making a mistake"? These thoughts, repeated countless times, solidify into belief. Eventually, the mind becomes your jailer, and the opinions of others seem justified because you've already convinced yourself of your inadequacy. When the inner critic rules, external rejection or criticism feels unbearable. But when you control your inner dialogue, no outside influence can shake you. Jung introduced the concept of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, suppress, or disown. Often, our inner critic arises from unintegrated shadows, perhaps childhood shame, parental criticism, or societal conditioning planted these seeds. Instead of confronting them consciously, we allow them to dominate our inner conversations, feeding fear, self-doubt, and overreaction. The first step in reclaiming control is awareness, noticing the dialogue without judgment. Here's an exercise. Next time you feel anxious, angry, or insecure, pause. Ask yourself, what am I saying to myself right now? Observe the words. Are they supportive, neutral, or destructive? Recognize that thoughts are not facts. They are interpretations, often distorted by fear and past trauma. This simple distinction creates a space between you and your mind, allowing conscious choice instead of automatic submission. Controlling inner dialogue doesn't mean eliminating all negative thoughts. That's impossible. It means noticing them and consciously choosing your response. For instance, when self-doubt arises, replace it with curiosity. What can I learn here? Or is this fear serving me or controlling me? Over time, this trains the mind to prioritize perspective over panic, reflection over reaction. Jung also stressed the importance of active imagination, the practice of consciously interacting with the psyche's content. By engaging with your inner thoughts rather than suppressing them, you integrate unconscious patterns instead of being ruled by them. This transforms destructive self-talk into insight and strength. The inner critic becomes a teacher rather than a tyrant. Philosophically, controlling inner dialogue aligns with the teachings of Stoicism and mindfulness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not events. Realize this and you will find strength." Every external insult, setback, or disappointment only has the power we allow it to have through our internal interpretation. By mastering your inner voice, you render external attempts to control you powerless. Practical ways to control your inner dialogue include 1. Awareness first. Notice your thoughts as they arise without judgment. Recognize repetitive negative loops. Awareness is the first form of control. 2. Question the narrative. Ask, is this thought fact or fear? Challenge the assumptions embedded in your self-talk. 3. Reframe actively. Replace self-criticism with constructive, empowering perspectives. Instead of "I'll fail," say, "I'm learning and growth requires risk." 4. Meditation and reflection. Daily stillness strengthens the observer within, giving you authority over your mental chatter. 5. Affirmation through action. Thoughts alone are insufficient. Back them with action. When you act aligned with your inner guidance, confidence replaces fear. When the inner dialogue is controlled, your external world reflects it. People can no longer manipulate you through words, provocations, or peer pressure. Decisions become deliberate, actions intentional, and your presence magnetic. Control over the inner world translates into freedom in the outer world. A story illustrates this. A young man was paralyzed by the fear of failure. Every morning, his mind told him he wasn't good enough to pursue his dreams. But through daily practice, questioning his thoughts, challenging his fears, and acting despite them, he gradually silenced the inner critic. Years later, the same man became a thought leader, not because the world approved, but because he had mastered the most formidable critic, himself. In Jungian terms, controlling your inner dialogue is part of individuation, the process of integrating conscious and unconscious elements. By taming the inner critic, you no longer allow shadow impulses to dictate your life. You reclaim the authority that belongs to you inherently. Remember, the mind can be your greatest ally or your cruelest jailer. If left unchecked, it amplifies external control, magnifying fear, dependence, and vulnerability. But when you master it, the mind becomes a source of clarity, courage, and unshakable freedom. No one can control you when you are the master of your inner world. 8. Stop explaining yourself. Not everyone deserves access to your reasoning. Peace, proving. One of the quietest forms of surrender is the compulsion to explain yourself. It starts innocently. You justify your actions to avoid conflict. You defend your choices to gain approval. You rationalize your feelings to be understood. But over time, this habit becomes a leash. Every explanation you offer is an opportunity for others to judge, manipulate, or control you. Carl Jung often emphasized that true psychological freedom arises when you no longer feel the need to prove yourself to the world. Think about it. How often have you found yourself trapped in conversations that drain your energy, all because you wanted to make someone understand your choices? Maybe you apologize for being late, even when circumstances were beyond your control. Perhaps you clarified your intentions to a friend, only for them to dismiss or misunderstand you. The more you explain, the more you open doors to judgment. Ironically, the people who demand explanations rarely respect the truth. They only care about control, validation, or their own comfort. Jung's work on individuation sheds light on this. He believed that the journey to self-realization requires cultivating an authentic self, separate from the expectations of others. When you constantly justify your choices, you give away your autonomy. You reinforce the notion that your identity is negotiable, that your worth is contingent on other people's understanding. In essence, you hand over power that should belong solely to you. Philosophically, this aligns with Stoic thought. Epictetus taught, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters." In modern terms, your reactions, especially explanations, are often unnecessary. They don't change perception. They merely invite further scrutiny. Silence, in contrast, asserts presence without submission. It communicates that you are grounded, whole, and unconcerned with approval. Practical wisdom emerges when you stop explaining yourself indiscriminately. First, recognize who truly deserves insight into your reasoning. Close confidants, mentors, and trusted allies may merit explanations because they operate in your mutual interest. Beyond that, most people do not require justification. Strangers, casual acquaintances, or even co-workers rarely need to understand your choices to respect your boundaries. Here's an example. Imagine a co-worker challenges your approach to a project. Your instinct might be to provide a detailed rationale, but consider a different approach, a concise statement like, "I appreciate your perspective, I'm confident in my method." No lengthy defense, no emotional expenditure, just calm assertion. You maintain control, avoid unnecessary conflict, and preserve energy for meaningful action. Over-explaining also feeds the manipulative. People skilled in psychological influence often prompt you to justify yourself repeatedly, subtly eroding confidence and fostering doubt. Every time you explain, they gain insight into your motivations and weaknesses. When you stop explaining, you remove this leverage. You reclaim your space and establish psychological sovereignty. Another benefit of restraint is emotional clarity. Explaining yourself constantly clouds judgment. Thoughts become entangled in others' reactions, and your intentions risk distortion. Silence and selective explanation, on the other hand, preserve mental energy, allowing you to act with precision and purpose. Jung would remind us that individuation requires facing the tension between inner authenticity and outer expectation. Over-explaining is an avoidance of this tension. It is a plea for external validation and a subtle denial of self. By resisting the urge to justify, you affirm your internal authority. You communicate without capitulation. You act without begging for permission. Consider relationships. People who habitually explain themselves often attract frustration and misunderstandings. The paradox is that the more you try to be understood, the less you are. But those who speak less act decisively and accept the possibility of misunderstanding, cultivate respect, mystery, and autonomy. They operate from a space of confidence rather than insecurity. Here's a practical mindset shift. I do not owe anyone an explanation for my truth. My integrity is sufficient. Repeat it, internalize it, and practice it daily. Start small. Decline to justify minor decisions, assert boundaries without rationalizing, and observe how people respond. Often you will find that most of the anxiety you attach to others' perceptions was self-imposed. The ultimate liberation comes when you realize that peace matters more than proving anything. Every explanation is a form of emotional expenditure. When you conserve it for the right purpose, your power grows. People cannot control someone who is centered, composed, and unconcerned with approval. Your presence alone communicates certainty. Carl Jung would argue that the need to explain is a symptom of an unintegrated self. the part of you that still fears judgment and seeks external validation. Stopping explanations is a profound act of individuation. It is the refusal to fragment yourself for anyone else's comfort. It is the declaration that your essence is not negotiable, not contingent, and not up for debate. In the end, mastering this principle is simple yet revolutionary. Stop explaining yourself. Focus instead on integrity, action, and selective communication. The less you justify, the freer you become. And when you reach that state, no one, not colleagues, not friends, not strangers, can wield your explanations as a tool to manipulate, undermine, or control you. Peace becomes your armor, and self-possession your power. 9. Embrace being misunderstood. Let them misjudge you. Their perception isn't your problem. One of the quietest rebellions against control is embracing the reality that not everyone will understand you, and that's perfectly okay. Most people spend their entire lives trying to fit into others' perceptions, constantly molding their thoughts, actions, and words to align with what they believe will be acceptable. But Carl Jung taught us a profound truth. The opinions of others are not mirrors of your worth. They are mirrors of their own limitations. Once you internalize this, freedom becomes possible. Being misunderstood feels uncomfortable. It triggers fear, defensiveness, and the urge to explain or justify. But here's the paradox. Trying to clarify yourself endlessly often strengthens the very control you are trying to resist. The moment you allow others' perceptions to dictate your behavior, you relinquish your autonomy. Misunderstanding is not a reflection of failure. It is an inevitable consequence of living authentically. Think about it. Every revolutionary thinker, every trailblazer, every innovator, and every philosopher was misunderstood at some point. Socrates was condemned for ideas that challenged the status quo. Van Gogh's work was ridiculed during his lifetime. Einstein's theories were initially dismissed as impossible. Misunderstanding is the natural response of minds that are not yet equipped to comprehend your vision. The external confusion has nothing to do with your value or truth. It only reflects the limitations of perception. Jung's idea of individuation, the process of becoming your complete self, requires a willingness to walk through life even when others misjudge you. Misunderstanding is a sign that you are on your own path, unbound by conformity. It is the universe's confirmation that you are not living to appease others. The more you embrace it, the less power anyone has to control you with judgment or criticism. Psychologically, misunderstanding can be a trigger for insecurity. The instinct is to defend, explain, or adjust your behavior to regain alignment with others' expectations. But each concession chips away at your autonomy. Instead, cultivate a mindset where being misunderstood is expected, even welcome. By accepting it, you reclaim your psychological sovereignty. You stop asking permission from the world to exist as you are. Practical ways to embrace being misunderstood include: 1. Shift perspective. Recognize that misunderstanding says more about the observer than the observed. Their perception is filtered through their experiences, biases, and limitations. 2. Detach emotionally. When someone misjudges you, pause before reacting. Ask yourself, does this define me? Does it limit me? If the answer is no, release attachment. 3. Avoid over-explaining. The desire to correct every misconception is a subtle form of submission. Choose silence or selective clarification instead. 4. Stand firm in your values. Misunderstanding often arises when your values conflict with societal norms. Honor your principles even if others cannot comprehend them. 5. Reframe it as strength. If people cannot understand you, it means you are operating on a level they are not prepared to engage with. Misunderstanding becomes proof of individuality, not isolation. Philosophically, this principle is aligned with existential thought. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote that individuals are condemned to be free, meaning that living authentically inevitably invites misinterpretation and resistance. Jung's psychological perspective complements this by showing that misjudgment is a reflection of unconscious projections. Others project their fears, insecurities, and limitations onto you, interpreting your actions through distorted lenses. Imagine a scenario. You pursue a creative project that excites you, but your peers criticize or dismiss it. Your first instinct might be to defend yourself, to explain your vision, or to conform to their tastes. But the moment you internalize that their misunderstanding is not a verdict on your worth, you regain control. You continue creating, confident that your purpose is independent of external comprehension. The energy once spent defending is now invested in growth, mastery, and self-expression. Misunderstanding is also a protective measure. It allows you to maintain a boundary between yourself and those who might manipulate or exploit you. When others cannot fully grasp your intentions, they cannot predict, control, or leverage your actions easily. This invisibility is power. It shields you from external influence while enabling you to act with clarity and integrity. Jung would remind us that individuation requires courage, the courage to be oneself in the face of societal misunderstanding. By embracing misjudgment, you align with your true self rather than a constructed persona designed to appease others. You cultivate resilience, emotional independence, and psychological freedom. Ultimately, embracing being misunderstood is not about arrogance or detachment from reality. It is about recognizing that the world's approval is not a prerequisite for your existence. It is a conscious refusal to surrender authority over your life to the interpretations of others. In doing so, you declare your autonomy. Your thoughts, actions, and purpose belong to you, not to anyone else's perception. When you fully accept this, you move through life with quiet confidence. Criticism slides off, manipulation loses power, and judgment becomes irrelevant. Misunderstanding transforms from a source of fear into a shield of freedom, and in that shield, Carl Jung's ultimate principle of self-mastery comes alive. No one can control you unless you allow them to. 10. Build a life that doesn't depend on anyone. Emotional independence. Total control. Become your own anchor. The final frontier of personal freedom is complete independence. Not just financially, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Carl Jung believed that reliance on others for validation, happiness, or security is a subtle form of enslavement. When your peace depends on someone else's choices, moods, or approval, you have unknowingly surrendered control. True mastery begins when you anchor yourself from within. Think about it. Many people structure their lives around relationships, social circles, or professional recognition. They wake each day seeking approval, connection, or external validation. When these sources fluctuate, as they inevitably do, they experience anxiety, depression, or anger. In essence, their happiness is outsourced. Whoever holds the keys to those external factors wields silent power over their lives. By contrast, when you cultivate a life that doesn't depend on anyone, you reclaim that power. Jung's concept of individuation, the journey to your authentic self, requires detachment from dependency. Dependency creates vulnerability. The more you rely on others, the more susceptible you are to manipulation, coercion, and emotional turbulence. Emotional independence is not about isolation. It's about building resilience and self-sufficiency so that external chaos cannot dictate your inner equilibrium. To build this kind of life, start with self-awareness. Recognize the areas where you are dependent, emotionally, socially, or even materially. Do you seek constant approval from friends or family? Do you rely on romantic partners to fill gaps in your self-worth? Do you allow the opinions of colleagues to determine your confidence? Once identified, these dependencies become targets for conscious transformation. Next, cultivate your internal resources. Emotional independence requires that you become your own anchor. Practices like journaling, meditation, self-reflection, and skill building strengthen your internal foundation. When you are capable of generating your own sense of fulfillment and stability, the external world loses its ability to control you. You no longer bend to fit someone else's expectations because your center is already grounded. Financial and practical independence also play a role. While money is not happiness, dependence on others for survival can create subtle forms of coercion. Achieving self-sufficiency through earning, saving, or skill development provides freedom to act without fear. This tangible independence reinforces the psychological principle. When you are not beholden to anyone, no one can manipulate your choices. Relationships, too, must be approached differently. Emotional independence does not mean detachment or avoidance of connection. It means that while you can love, support, and care, your sense of identity and worth does not hinge on the relationship's presence or approval. You engage fully, yet you remain whole regardless of acceptance, agreement, or reciprocation. This mindset makes your relationships healthier, more authentic, and less vulnerable to control. Philosophically, this principle aligns with the Stoics and existential thinkers. Epictetus wrote, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding what lies beyond our control." Jung would argue that emotional independence is achieved by confronting the unconscious needs that tie you to others. Only by recognizing these needs and consciously fulfilling them internally can you achieve freedom that cannot be undermined. Building a life that doesn't depend on anyone also means embracing solitude as a strength. Solitude allows reflection, creativity, and self-discovery. It is not loneliness, it is communion with your authentic self. Those who fear solitude are easily controlled because they constantly seek validation and connection to feel whole. When you are comfortable in your own presence, external pressures lose their influence. Here's a practical approach to start. 1. Identify dependencies. Journal about areas where your emotional or psychological state is influenced by others. 2. Develop self-reliance. Build habits, routines, and passions that fulfill you without external input. 3. Anchor in values. Let your choices be guided by internal principles, not by others' opinions or expectations. 4. Embrace financial and practical autonomy. Cultivate skills that reduce reliance on external sources for security. 5. Practice selective engagement. Participate in relationships and communities without surrendering control of your identity or happiness. The reward is profound. When your life is self-anchored, you operate from a space of freedom, clarity, and power. Nobody can coerce, manipulate, or control you through approval, fear, or guilt. You act from integrity rather than compulsion. You create from abundance rather than desperation. And this is the culmination of Jung's wisdom. The only person whose control matters is your own. In the final analysis, total freedom is not about isolation or detachment from the world. It is about mastery over self. Emotional independence is the foundation upon which every other principle we've explored rests. Silence, detachment from outcomes, control over inner dialogue, embracing misunderstanding, and resisting the need to explain yourself all become natural extensions of a life that doesn't depend on anyone. By building this life, you achieve what few ever do: unshakable freedom. You are no longer a puppet of circumstance, opinion, or expectation. You are your own anchor, your own source of power, your own authority. And once you reach this state, no external force, not society, not peers, not manipulative individuals, can control you. Freedom, in its deepest sense, begins and ends with you. Thank you for watching. Remember, true freedom begins within. No one can control you once you master your mindset, detach from outcomes, silence unnecessary explanations, and anchor yourself emotionally. The world will always try to manipulate, judge, or misunderstand you, but that is no longer your concern. Your power lies in self-awareness, inner dialogue, and independence. Embrace being misunderstood. Release the need for validation, and cultivate a life that doesn't depend on anyone. This is not just philosophy, it's liberation. Live it, embody it, and watch as the world loses its grip on you.